3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast, a place for founders and entrepreneurs to discover breakthrough in their business. I'm Benj Miller, fellow founder, business coach, and your host. This is your place to gain clarity and control as you lead through the challenges you face every day in your business. Running a business is just hard, so we're bringing you the conversations with people who are figuring it out, have figured it out, to help you find breakthrough. Welcome to the System and Soul Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back. We got a fun episode. I've already enjoyed our kind of pre-conversation. This is a new friend for me, but we're going to hang out with Joe Mull. Joe is a keynote speaker and the author of the book Employability. Got a lot of great thoughts and ideas about how we should be thinking about our employees, for lack of a better word. And so the three things we're going to be talking through today that are on his mind is that people are tired. The second one is that there's a myth out there that no one really wants to work, and that's just not true. And the third is that employers still don't know where commitment comes from. So I think he's going to shed some light on that. Hopefully he's got some directionality or answers for us on that one. But I'm super excited to have this conversation. Joe, welcome to System and Soul.
Hey, man, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mutual. It's mutual. So as I warned you, we always start off with what is one weird, quirky thing that we can't Google and find out about you.
Okay. Well, I've been a professional speaker for coming up on 20 years now. And the most nervous I've ever been for a speech was last summer when I took the stage in front of 1,000 fellow professional speakers. And in the middle of my keynote, I was joined on stage by my 11-year-old daughter, and we sang together as a surprise for the audience.
What was the motivation for that?
Well, my bachelor's degree is actually in music and theater, and I was giving a keynote about how if you want to run a successful speaking, coaching, or consulting business, you need to be willing to take more risks and even fail, even in front of your audience, in order to be your authentic self. And so I told this story about how Lily wanted to audition for community theater until she found out she had to sing by herself. And so we ended up coming up with this whole mantra about being brave for 1 minute, because that's all you have to do when you do an audition, just be brave for 1 minute. So on stage, I told the story in a really kind of fun and funny way about Lily learning to be brave for 1 minute at the audition. And I said, you know, what kind of transformation could you create in your own business if you could be brave for 1 minute? And that's not just fortune cookie wisdom. I've seen it with my own eyes, because Lily went from being afraid to sing by herself in a room with two people for 1 minute to this. And then she walked out on stage and we sang together in front of 1,000 people. It was pretty amazing.
Awesome. How'd it go?
Oh man, those people poured so much love into us. And I mean, she just was an absolute grand slam home run.
That's awesome.
She doesn't even know, right? She's 12 now. She doesn't even know what she did. Right. And later in life, she's going to figure out, wow, that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, that's kind of the perspective of the parent, is being able to see that. That's super cool. Why do you think that made you more nervous than normal?
Well, there were so many levels to it, man. Obviously, there's the dad factor there, because I had to have a plan B and a plan C. Like, what if in the last minute she was like, I'm not doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And because she was nervous, but she put in the work, man. She really just committed to, I'm going to do it even though I'm afraid of it. And that was amazing. But, you know, still had to have backup plans. Plus, for me as a speaker, speaking at that level in front of my peers, right, who understand my work, but maybe don't always get to see my work, there's kind of a lot at stake there too. So yeah, there was a lot going on there.
Totally. I get that. That's super fun. Thanks for sharing. Let's jump into the things that are on your mind. So number one, people are tired. What are you thinking about? Why are you thinking about that? What are you feeling about that?
Yeah. Well, much of my work centers around teaching leaders how to be better bosses and how to find and keep devoted employees. And as I do training and workshops and keynote at conferences, People will acknowledge on the surface, yeah, man, the workforce is really tired and there's a lot of burnout and people are exhausted. But I don't think we really appreciate just how tired people are. And tired does not exist just at a level of, boy, it's been a bit of a day for the past 2-3 years since the pandemic. I am talking about a workforce who, for decades, has been overworked and underpaid. And so when I say people are tired, I mean people are tired not just from workloads that have exploded by more than 30% in just the last 5 years, but they're tired of earning wages that barely pay the bills and cover inflation. They're tired of going to workplaces with unsupportive bosses and toxic cultures. They're tired of getting up every day and getting ready to go to work and driving to work and spending all day at work and coming home at night and rushing around to get a couple of things done before they have to go to bed early to get ready for work, right? And so there's this massive recalibration that's taking place around how work fits into our lives that is being driven by a problem with quality of life for so many people because they are tired.
So as employers, what is our not only responsibility, but opportunity?
Yeah. One of the things that we wrote about in the book that you mentioned, which is called employalty, and it's a funny word. It's a made up word.
Oh,
it's
yeah, it is. Totally.
Portmanteau.
I just read it wrong. Absolutely.
No, it's all good. And I've done a lot of these interviews. I've gotten employality, employability. Yeah, I've gotten all sorts, man. But we made up this word, employalty, to translate the complex into the simple. And we're kind of playing a trick on readers, right? You hear the word employalty and you think it's employee loyalty, but it's employer loyalty and humanity all smashed together into a new idea. So I wanted to write a book that married together a lot of the social science research around what ignites commitment at work and what's happening in the labor market right now with people who are so tired. And we analyzed more than 200 articles and studies around why people quit a job or take a new one or stay somewhere long term in a post-COVID world. And I can tell you with conviction that if you want to find and keep devoted people, you've got to win in 3 areas of the employee experience. And we can unpack those here as we get talking a little bit about that third thing on my list about employers still don't know where commitment comes from. But the long and short of it is this: we overcome the tired and we become a place where people really can give their all when we create a more humane employee experience.
Yes.
When we stop treating people as a commodity and we start engineering an employee experience that recognizes and accepts that people have lives outside of work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. We would never say this, but you could kind of bucket us in like a leadership development type industry. And one of the sad things about the universal law of the cobbler's children have no shoes is I've seen a lot of these organizational leadership development organizations that are just absolute shit shows. And so like my number one focus for our organization is don't be that. And so this morning, our operator, Mackenzie, led us through a beautiful exercise, and we just spent an hour. We're virtual, so we spent an hour on Zoom together. It was, it's just like water cooler time that doesn't happen unless you make it. But the exercise she took us through, and the way people were able to share coming out of that, and the vulnerability and authenticity, and there was notes on Slack afterwards. It's like, my goodness, I never would have shared that at any of my other places of work. Yeah. And it is that elevation of humanity first, right?
Yep.
And allowing them to be real people in the workplace. What are the ways? So when I think about people are tired, you mentioned a few things. One is comp, right? So they're feeling undervalued. So maybe the motivation is less there, and adding to the fatigue. That seems like it's either an easy fix or a hard fix. You can either pay them more or you can't, and then you got a business problem. What else is there? Because some of it is systemic from a culture that is tired, right? And it has nothing to do with the workplace. So what can we do as employers to help just be helpful?
Well, I think there are a number of factors that people are just rejecting nowadays. They're saying, I am no longer going to tolerate a number of things that we've come to accept as a part of work. So, for example, our lives outside of work are way more complicated than they ever have been before in terms of childcare, in terms of if I'm the primary caregiver to an elderly parent, in terms of, it's important to me to volunteer, it's important to me to make time to walk my dog or to exercise, take care of my physical self. And so as we've seen workloads grow and we've seen the number of hours a week that Americans spend at work continue to go up, the time that we have in our lives to attend to all the things, all that complexity outside of our lives continues to get eroded. And there's a backlash that has actually started a number of years ago and continues to grow. So we've all heard the term, the Great Resignation, right? And the conversation around this, one of the reasons we wrote this book is because I was really frustrated with the conversation around this, which points to the Great Resignation as something that started in late 2020, early 2021. And it's just not true. So we know that since the Great Recession in 2008, more and more people every year have been voluntarily leaving their jobs for better jobs. And we see that in the jobs data. So in 2010, 23 million Americans voluntarily quit their job. That doesn't include retirements or terminations. And last year it was 50 million. So the number has more than doubled in 13 years. At the exact same time, hiring in the US has followed the exact same trajectory, but at 50% higher levels. So every year in the US, we've had 50% more hiring than quitting. So people aren't quitting. It's not the Great Resignation. It's the Great Upgrade. And when you ask people, why are you switching? You hear all sorts of answers. I need better pay, a better commute, a more flexible schedule, a better boss, more fulfilling work. I need better work-life balance. But all of those answers roll up to a bigger idea, which is quality of life.
Yeah. Joe, we're rolling out this new tool. I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet, but I'm going to tell you about it. It's called the 6 types of comp. And we have this little assessment that we're going to be able to, anybody will be able to use, but it looks at our employees and asks them, like, honestly, like 3 questions in each one of these 6, but it's not just financial. Financial is one of the 6. There's emotional, there's social, there's psychological, spiritual, which is a bit of a wrong name, but it's like the purpose side of what they do. I'm forgetting the 5th and 6th, but it speaks to what you're saying. And the flip side of what we're trying on the employer side. So that's to get feedback. Like, are they feeling well compensated or, but there's also like a match that happens because some people are money driven. Some people are flexibility driven, so like, when we were testing this out, one of the aha moments, Mackenzie that I mentioned earlier, like made me do this and give her the feedback. And I had 2 of the 6 that were really low. And she had a reaction that was really worried, like, oh no, like we've got a big problem. And I'm like, no, I don't even care about those 2. These 2 that I care about are exceptional with what I'm doing right now. So I don't even care about that. Like maybe it'll be an issue someday, but it's not right now. So it's a really cool tool to kind of get at the root of that. And then eventually, here's our dream for this, Joe, is that we'd actually be able to say, hey, you care about these couple things in compensation. Here's the businesses that align with that. So that we can actually match people with the type of employer that fits. And it's not saying any is better than any other. It's just a match. So that's cool. I'm encouraged by what you're saying because it feels like we're possibly on the right track with what
well, when we get to that 3rd thing and I tell you about the internal scorecard that we created in our employalty model, you're going to be like, holy cow, does that align with a lot of what you just described?
That's amazing. I can't wait to get there. All right. So if you had one thing that every listener hearing this would go and do and take action about this topic of people are tired, what would you encourage them to do?
We call it Re-Humanizing the Workplace. I would ask myself a question. If I'm a leader, if I'm a business owner, if I'm an executive, where do our systems, policy, or employee experience create suffering for our employees? And then I would work to eradicate that suffering wherever possible. So we know that the idea of dehumanization, which is just simply treating people as a commodity and not a fully formed human being, is really at the root of so much of this exhaustion and dissatisfaction that is driving so much job changing in the labor market in the past decade. And we've seen systemized suffering in a lot of businesses and organizations that we've just come to accept as normal business practices for years. I'll give you a couple examples. In restaurants and retail locations, for example, a lot of employees won't get their schedule for next week until the end of this week because the manager hasn't made the schedule yet. That's inhumane. How are you supposed to live your life, be a caregiver, have hobbies, take care of yourself, make a schedule without knowing when I'm going to need to be at work, or promising a certain number of hours to someone and then not giving them to them? How am I supposed to be financially stable?
Yeah.
Or workplaces, I have a local grocery store where if you work as a checkout person, a scanner there. I don't know why the word just completely escaped me. Thank you. You have to stand, right? Workplaces that say you have to stand throughout the entirety of your work, or that tell you when you can go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right. As if I'm not going to buy groceries there because the senior citizen checking out my groceries is sitting on a stool. It's absurd. And these are inhumanities that are often reserved for the people in the bottom half of the org chart. Right. Could you ever imagine telling an accountant that they have to stand all day and when to go to the bathroom? And so there are moments when we think about the systems and the policies that we install in our organizations and that we impose on employees that create suffering outside of work. That's the one thing. Where can we get rid of that?
Thank you. I appreciate that answer so much, mostly because it starts with a question and then ends with an application, which is like my love language. So that's a beautiful answer. But also I think there's sometimes we don't want to know as employers, and we think that not knowing, if we don't acknowledge the problem, then we don't have to solve it. We can pretend it's not there. But to flip that and say, this is the greatest opportunity for you to solve something that can make a huge impact on all the layers. That's super cool. All right. So the myth that no one wants to work.
Right. So I don't know if you belong to any community Facebook groups, but I belong to a couple community Facebook groups in my neighborhood. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you can belong to a Facebook group for like your school district or your neighborhood, right? So there's this gentleman, I tell this story when I'm keynoting at conferences. There's a gentleman in our community Facebook group who owns several businesses, and he's constantly for the past 3 years been posting positions in this community Facebook group. And he always starts out the posts the same way. Help me find good people. No one wants to work. Then he lists the hours and the pay. And it's been an interesting thing to watch members of the community finally, after seeing this happen again and again, come back and respond to this guy and say, hold on, time out. It's not that no one wants to work. It's that no one wants to work for you. Because the nature of how you're trying to employ people is not realistic. I can't work for that wage, and must work evenings and weekends, must be available mornings, evenings, and weekends. We really want this to be the story when and we've heard this sort of no one wants to work phrase for years now. When we have trouble filling positions, when we have trouble finding people for our jobs, we want to blame people instead of the jobs. We want to engage in this thought exercise that the real issue is a character defect across a significant portion of the population around work ethic, right? When the problem is the jobs, and we have the data to back this up. We know that here in the US, for example, unemployment's below 4%. There are only a handful of months in the last 50 years where it's been lower than it is right now. And at the same time, we are adding jobs every month to an economy where we already have almost 10 million unfilled jobs.
Yeah.
We're adding 250,000 jobs a month to the economy, and we have been for years. And if you took every unemployed person in the US right now and put them in a job, you'd still have 5 million unfilled jobs. Right. So we really want the story to be about people, but it's not. There's no staffing shortage. There's a great jobs shortage. And when you switch that mindset, when you turn the mirror inward, your organization can start solving the actual problems that are preventing people from wanting to work for you.
Yes.
And when we wrote this book, one of my favorite little nuggets that I found in all of our research was we found a professor out of Canada who had been studying generational tropes, and he found instances of no one wants to work appearing in North American newspapers going back 120 years.
Really?
It is a biased, tired generational trope. Right? I tell workshops all the time, I hate to break it to you all, but all the complaints you have about the young people coming in behind you are the same complaints that people had about you when you got here.
Yeah. It has more to do with stage of life and generational gap than it does actual generations.
No question. Yep.
Yeah. Super cool. All right. So you got me super excited. Where does commitment come from? Help us navigate that.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a quick story because there is a root cause to why I'm going to give you a one-sentence answer to that question, because the world needs a one-sentence answer to that question. Where does commitment come from at work? I actually wrote this book after a disaster of a podcast interview I was on a year and a half ago. I had a lovely conversation with the host for about 30 minutes about where commitment comes from at work. And we talked about many of the things that you just referenced on the tool that you're building, right? All the things that leaders got to get right and attend to and think about in order to tap into intrinsic motivation and to activate emotional and psychological commitment. At the end of the 30 minutes, the host said to me, "All right, Joe, let's get you out of here on this. Let's put a nice bow on this for everyone. Give it to me in one sentence. Where does commitment come from at work?" And I went, "Oh, boy, I don't think I could give it to you in one sentence. I mean, as we just talked about, there are a whole lot of things you got to get right." And then I proceeded to recap the entire podcast interview in the world's longest run-on sentence. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you start talking and you can hear yourself talking, but then it's like you can't stop talking, right? So that happened to me. And after that podcast interview, I kept thinking about that question in one sentence: where does commitment come from at work? And I thought, boy, no wonder so many leaders struggle to turn ordinary people into devoted employees when it feels like we have to memorize a doctoral dissertation's amount of research to think about all the things we need to pay attention to. And so I took on the challenge. I said, I want to create this one sentence answer. And so I married together the decades of experience I've had doing leadership development work with a lot of research into what's happening in the labor market right now. And it took me a while, but once I got it, I got it. And so the one sentence answer to the question you just asked me, where does commitment come from at work? And the one sentence answer I would give if I could go back in time and end that podcast the right way is this: commitment and retention appear when employees are in their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss. So these are the three factors of employalty that we write about in the book. These are the three components of becoming what we call a destination workplace. We say that every employee in every job, in every company on planet Earth is walking around with an internal psychological scorecard that determines whether they join, stay, care, and try. So it's about retention, but it's also about effort. And if you check all of the boxes on these three factors, you get engaged, committed employees who deliver work at the highest level of quality. And if you don't check the boxes on that internal scorecard, people's commitment wanes and they start looking around for a new opportunity and they leave, or worse, they mentally check out and stay. And now there are dimensions to each of these factors: ideal job, meaningful work, great boss. And I can tell you what those are if you want to get into the nitty gritty of that. But that's the one sentence answer. Commitment and retention appear when employees are in their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss.
Yeah. Give us a couple of the bullet points on either of those. All those. I could guess what they are, but I love that you've gone really deep and truly boiling this down to the top things.
Yeah, nothing about that I'm going to say is going to be a surprise. So ideal job is about what I get in exchange for what I do. And the three dimensions of it are compensation, workload, and flexibility. right? Compensation is a continuum, and the more generous compensation, the more impact it has on commitment and loyalty. Workload is about having a manageable workload, right? When people feel overrun, commitment, loyalty, effort actually decreases. But if I have a manageable workload, my commitment, my loyalty, my dedication goes up. And flexibility is now the number one most requested workplace benefit in the world. And it's not just about remote work. Flexibility is just about having some autonomy, some choice over where, when, and how I work. So those are the three factors of ideal job. When my compensation, workload, and flexibility are right, that job fits into my life like a puzzle piece snapping into place. The second factor of meaningful work, the three dimensions are purpose, strengths, and belonging. So purpose. Do I believe my work matters, that it makes a difference? Strengths. Do I get to use my unique talents and skills and gifts in the role I'm in? And then belonging. Am I an accepted and celebrated member of a team? We know that when those three experiences happen consistently for an employee, they're experiencing meaningful work, which is something that's been studied by social science researchers since the 70s. So that's really meaningful work is really about what I do and who I do it with in my job. And then the third factor of great boss has three dimensions to it. We call them trust, coaching, and advocacy. So because of the nature of the work that you and your team do, that there are so many things a leader needs to get right that before an employee is going to point to them and say, man, I've got a great boss. And you also know that it can be pretty fragile, even if we've done a lot of things right. We wanted to help leaders understand the three things that you should pay the most attention to and that you should work the hardest to get right. So trust, do I grant trust and earn trust? Mm-hmm. Coaching, do I engage in those open-ended, question-driven conversations that mine people for their creativity and their insights? And then advocacy, do I consistently act in the best interests of this person, right? Do I care not just about the tasks and duties of their job, for example? Do I care about who they are outside of work and what their story is? Do I care only about their time with us, or do I care about their career on the whole and its trajectory? And that may or may not include us.
Yeah.
So we show this in the book as what I think is the sexiest Venn diagram ever created, but I'm biased.
Sounds like it.
Right. So it's ideal job, meaningful work, great boss with each of those three dimensions underneath. The little space in the center where the Venn diagram overlaps is commitment.
I'm a sucker for a good mental model. So I absolutely love this. I was taking notes on the whole thing. And just to confirm what you're saying, we have this exercise that we do with senior leadership teams. So I've probably done it 24 times or something, but we have people journal and write on their own and then share. Yeah. And we have them think about the greatest boss that they've ever had. Mm-hmm. Well, what was it about them that made them a great boss? And if we get really educational about it and we try and sound smart, we're going to be like, well, they were a great communicator and they really knew, they made sure we had accountability and execution and a great strategy and all these things. But that's not the majority of the answers. The answers are basically different words for all the things that you said. They trusted me. They had my back. They mentored me. All those, it's exactly what you were saying. So I feel like I've heard that in different language. So just, it resonates as absolutely true. You had a little nugget, and I'm not sure I captured the whole thing in there, but what commitment looked like was, I think you said stay, care, try, and I missed one.
I rattle off these four words a lot because for me, they're the four things that employers want when it comes to their workforce. Join, stay, care, and try.
Yeah.
So join and stay, right, is about recruitment and retention. And care and try is about emotional and psychological commitment, and then the discretionary effort that we deploy as a result of that emotional and psychological commitment. And so sometimes when I'm doing keynotes or workshops, I'll do a word cloud exercise with some of that like interactive polling technology where I'll ask the question,
Yep.
what leads employees to care and try at work? And everybody pulls out their cell phone and they type in a 1 or 2 word answer, and they show up as this sort of morphing, twisting word cloud on the screen. And the answers given the most are the ones that appear largest on the screen. And it never fails. When I ask what leads people to care and try at work, the answers all related to money are the largest answers on the screen. They're the most popular answer. And I'm going to tell you what I tell them, which is that this is a misperception. Money, pay rate, wages, benefits, compensation, all the stuff we would put in the comp bucket have almost nothing to do with effort at work. They have everything to do with those first 2 words of join and stay.
Yep.
Right? If you want me to join and you want me to stay, you got to get the money right. But after that, it is off the table as an influence on commitment. Care and try are all the other things that they answered in terms of flexibility, recognition. Do I experience coaching? Am I a part of a team where I feel included? These are the things that determine, do I feel like my work matters? They determine the effort behind the work that I'm going to deliver.
Joe, I've absolutely loved this conversation. I've got to ask you something. I don't know if you're going to answer, but you've got a new book coming out or just came out. Can you give us a sneak peek of that? The New Age of Work?
Yeah, the book is called Employalty: How to Ignite Commitment and Keep Top Talent in the New Age of Work. And we wrote this book really built out of trying to create that one sentence answer. Where does commitment come from at work? And to overcome some of the myths that are out there and the misperceptions that continue to fuel our beliefs around hiring, right? That this idea that no one wants to work, or that this all of our staffing challenges were caused by COVID. And so what we did was we sourced a lot of research, but also a lot of real world stories of employers and employees that showcase each of these dimensions and the impact they can have. So for example, we really tried to stay away from large corporations that you read about a lot in business books, right? So there's no mention of Apple or Southwest or Patagonia, which are great companies, but most people don't work there. So we have stories in there about a nonprofit in Seattle, for example, who works with juvenile offenders, who decided to raise the minimum salary for all of their employees to $70,000 a year, because otherwise they were perpetuating the very material conditions that they were trying to lift people out of as a nonprofit. We wrote a story in the book about a small hospital in Western Kentucky and about how the head of the facilities department there eliminated schedules for his entire facilities team, and how it completely transformed the level of commitment that he got from people and saved a ton of money in the organization. We wrote in the book about a woman who had been a college professor for almost 30 years. And then after having really struggled with some changes in her employment, completely reinvented her career. And now she's a hospice chaplain. So we've got a lot of stories in the book that really key into the psychology around what leads people to join, stay, care, and try.
I am an advocate and believer that our people are the most important part of our business. And it starts with the culture that we put them in. And everything that you're talking about is part of that culture that we're inviting them into. So I am, Joe, I'm your new biggest fan. I really appreciate this conversation. It has been, not that long, it's pretty short, but man, it is full of nuggets. It's been a while since I've had this many notes on one short conversation. So I really appreciate your work, your spirit, your clarity of thought. It's been great having you here. If you've enjoyed this, you can go to joemull.com, joemull.com. Go get his book. It's on Amazon, or you can find it on the website. Joe, any parting last words of wisdom or encouragement?
You know what? Let's never forget that people generally do a great job when they believe they have a great job. And so it's not an oversimplification to suggest that the first step to getting better at finding and keeping devoted employees is simply asking, what would make this place the very best place to be a blank?
Yeah. Love it. Thank you for your time and wisdom, Joe. It's been great.
Been great being with you, man. Thanks so much. Good talk.